Welcome to a special bonus episode of Cinemaholics. I'm John Negroni, and Will Ashton is here too.
What up?
Will.
John.
It's December.
Yes.
So many movies have come out lately. I obviously can't keep up. I have like a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, just too many things we can't keep on top of, or at least I can't keep on top of because I don't get to see things as quickly or readily as you do, unfortunately.
Hey, I don't see it. How many times are we going to have this conversation?
Sure.
I still haven't seen plenty of things that you have. It's just we're making the most of it.
Mm-hmm.
We're adjusting, fine-tuning, the knobs of award season.
Yeah.
And that includes a review or two of some films that we've seen. Mm-hmm. Like we saw these a while ago.
Yeah.
But, we just didn't have time to kind of squeeze them in.
Yeah.
But now they're in limited release. So people can check these movies out. I think it's a great time to talk about them.
I think Nightmare Alley is a wide release, right?
Oh, yeah. Maybe that is a wide release. Swan Song, I think, is like coming to TV Plus later. But we'll talk about that later.
I mean, if you're hearing some of these reports, Nightmare Alley is becoming a limited release because they keep shooing it out of screens to show Spider-Man. So that's not great.
Yeah. You could almost forget Nightmare Alley Searchlight Pictures, right?
Yeah.
That's Disney.
Yeah.
And Disney's like kind of, it's a weird situation because it's not like Disney is distributing Spider-Man. It's an MCU thing. Right. Marvel Studios is Disney, but that's Sony.
It's kind
of weird.
It's the same umbrella, just different corporations or different companies under the same corporation.
We should be clear. Like Marvel Studios, like Disney's not really, they're not making money directly from Spider-Man, as far as I understand. They're making money like indirectly through the MCU kind of continuing its brand power. But this is Sony. That's part of the deal, isn't it?
I guess. But I mean, if Disney was concerned, I think, with the well-being of this movie, Nightmare Alley, I think they would have not put it on the same weekend as Nightmare Alley, because if you're gonna be like,
Agreed.
Hey, I'm gonna go to the theater see that new movie with Willem Dafoe, they're not gonna be like, oh, you mean Nightmare Alley? They're thinking Spider-Man
right.
Homecoming, or sorry, Spider-Man No Way Home. Can't remember these titles.
That took you a couple tries.
Yeah, well, the titles are very confusing to me, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, but Nightmare Alley, it's counter programming. It's a movie that for sure has always been a counter programming thing down to its original. So let's talk about this new movie directed by Guillermo del Toro.
I will ask you simple questions. You will answer in short sentences only what you believe to be absolute truth.
Absolute truth. I can do that.
Now, brief as you can. What is your name?
Stanton Carlisle.
Are you a true medium?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Carlisle.
Doctor, how about that?
Please lay down.
Can you read minds?
Yes, I can. Under the right circumstances.
Keep your answers brief.
What do I want?
To be found out, same as everybody else.
Are you in contact with the beyond?
Well, we've had our share of snake charmers in the past. We deal with them.
This is Toro's first film since Shape of Water, which, of course, won the Academy Award for Best Picture.
Yeah.
What a success story The Shape of Water was. I think that was our first Oscars that we talked about on Cinemaholics,
yes,
right?
I remember because that was the year that people were like, oh, they picked the safe pick. And I was like, this is the safe pick? The movie where a mute woman falls in love with a fish man is the safe pick? I found that to be hard to believe, but I really like that movie a lot. I feel like people weirdly, after it won Best Picture, I feel like its reputation has kind of gone down a little bit for whatever reason. I guess that's kind of the Oscar curse, is that, with the exception of maybe like something like Moonlight or Parasite, a lot of films that win Best Picture don't hold up in quite the same esteem after they win that coveted prize. But I really do like that movie a lot. I've only seen it the one time, but I really enjoyed it.
It's a strong movie. I remember that year. I think people were just expecting, I thought the safe pick was going to be, I think it was 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri was that year.
Yeah, that movie.
Yeah. Darkest Hour and
that's
maybe
safe.
Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah, Darkest Hour I think is a safe pick. But I mean, I get that that was the year of Lady Bird, that was the year of Get Out. I think a lot of people, and understandably so, wanted those two movies to do really well, and they did. They both won Oscars.
They got stuff.
Yeah, and they're both really good films. And I really liked Shape of Water too, so I wasn't upset.
I've been kind of fascinated to see sort of the push and pull of Nightmare Alley as a film over the last few weeks, because critics screened it earlier in the month in order for it to like hit qualifying for awards, right? So all the different guilds, Critics' Choice, like all these places, we were able to see it early because, Searchlight kind of wanted to push it a bit, right? For Oscar consideration. Yeah. I know they also had French Dispatch, but I would say this has more juice behind it for an Oscar than the new Wes Anderson movie.
Sure.
Yeah. Can you believe that?
I just remember though, like there were like two big question marks leading up to December where people were like, we don't know how West Side Story is going to do, and we don't know how Nightmare Alley is going to do. And I believe they premiered the same week. They're both, Fox movies, or what's formerly known as Fox. And, obviously West Side Story did really, really well critically. And this movie didn't get bad reviews, but I think it got maybe more of a muted or mixed response. And I think when that happened, some of its Oscar hopefulness went away.
But it's picking up again.
Is it?
I think now that it's hit wide release, Nightmare Alley has really sort of like, I'm seeing that's what I mean by push and pull. I'm seeing a renewed enthusiasm for its prospects. And I was confused about it because there are three films at play here that I think Searchlight always kind of had in mind for bringing this about. Because like Nomadland was also Searchlight, wasn't it? Wasn't it like a co-production thing? Because
yes.
they did it with Hulu. Yeah.
Or at least the release of it was Hulu. But I don't know if Hulu profited off it directly or anything like that.
I'd have to double check that. But I mean, yeah, they had a great 2020 in that respect. Even though Nomadland technically is 2021 release for the general audiences. But, last year was not a big year comparatively. Like if I remember last year, we had like Downhill, the David Copperfield movie.
Oh,
but
boy.
this year they have a lot of stuff. Like they have Summer of Soul, which is campaigning obviously for documentary, and then they have I think 3 movies here that they had to sort of pick from. I was like, which one's going to be our Oscar play? Is it going to be The Eyes of Tammy Faye? Probably not. It's not a movie that everybody's really loving. Garfield has Tick, Tick, Boom, but Chastain for, Tammy Faye, that's where they're kind of putting their money in that basket.
Yeah.
French Dispatch, that's, Wes Anderson is kind of bankable as an awards favorite, especially since that was like, I think the first time in a long time, if ever, that a Wes Anderson film was coming out around award season. Usually he does it earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And then you have, of course, Antlers, just kidding. Nightmare Alley, which I think that's the one because they picked that for December. Eyes of Tammy Faye's September. French Dispatch is an October release. Clearly, Nightmare Alley was there. We're going to put this out in December. We're going to see what the public thinks. It's Del Toro. We have Bradley Cooper. We have Cate Blanchett. We have Rooney Mara. We have Oscar, neon lights on this movie, and now it's a little bit more uncertain. It's always sort of been in the like Oscar bubble, but I don't think it's ever been a front runner. That said, it's got some stuff going for it. I think Critics' Choice, it got 8 nominations.
Okay,
so like including Best Picture and Best Director for Del Toro as expected. So I don't know. Well, I don't know.
If I were a betting man, I would say, and I haven't looked at the predictions at the moment from different publications, but my guess would be that it might get a art direction or like production design type nomination. It maybe will get an adapted screenplay nomination. Cooper is obviously in the conversation for Best Actor, but I think that category is so stacked as it usually is that he'll probably get booted out, and they might. I don't know. Is he being considered for Best Supporting Actor for Licorice Pizza at the moment, or is that not really happening? I don't know.
I don't think that's gonna. I don't think that there's any.
Well, I didn't know
juice behind that.
I didn't know if that.
I know
was
people
competing.
were trying to make it a thing,
right.
but no.
Okay, I didn't know, but I mean, I think he's due for an Oscar. I think people will want to give him some sort of critical or awards consideration, and I think a lot of people expect that to happen with The Star Is Born, but.
Which was a much better performance than in Nightmare Alley, I think.
I think he's quite good in Nightmare Alley, but we can discuss that more in a bit. Certainly.
Yeah. Because I have my criticisms. I think you have yours. I would say that like adapted screenplay, that's a tough sell just because this is a remake. It's sure you're kind of adapting the novel, but really this movie's picking up a lot of its points from the original movie. So I don't know, maybe a nomination, sure, but I don't know if it would actually win. And then, director is always like a crapshoot considering how usually if you're going to win Best Director, even if your film doesn't win Best Picture, like you got to have like some kind of movie. Like we're talking about like Roma, where Cuarón gets the Oscar for that, even though Green Book wins the whole thing.
Right.
We don't have to relitigate that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe if I don't know. It's coming out in December, obviously, but I don't know if it came out later in the year when it was fresher on people's minds, maybe Del Toro would be in the conversation more. I don't know.
It's unpredictable because we still have SAG Awards. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know what the BAFTAs are really going to look like, and Critics' Choice isn't until next month, and then the Oscars aren't until the end of March. So like, it's completely unpredictable. You never know where the tides are going to flow. All I can say is that from the people I follow, and I know you and I have different timelines.
Sure.
I see energy for this movie that I wasn't seeing a few weeks ago. When I was coming out of the screening, people were like, I didn't like it. I was like one of the lone voices, like, you know what? I like that movie. I think that it was really well done and I enjoyed it quite a bit, even though I have some complaints. Everybody else around me was just sort of like, nope, not, I'm not, this was a nightmare. You're right.
Yeah, no, I don't remember the response being overwhelmingly strong, but I definitely remember it being pretty favorable when it came out, or at least when the critics got to see it. But
I'm seeing the strongest reactions in the positive direction right now, like from like people on Twitter and like that. I'm starting to see for not the first time, but definitely like more of for the first time, people being like, this movie's fantastic. Like, this is really great. You got to go check it out.
See, I'm seeing more people being like, don't forget this film. Like, if you're going to see movies in theaters, like, don't forget about this one because it needs the love and consideration if we want more movies like it. That's what I'm seeing right now on Twitter. I'm not seeing like I'm
seeing that too. Yeah, I'm seeing both.
All right. Yeah.
I'm probably seeing that more, to your credit. Like, I'm seeing that more than I'm seeing the, like, this movie's actually really, really great. But yeah, let's actually talk about the movie though. Starting with the original Nightmare Alley. I think we both have seen this, right?
I was going to ask.
1947.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it quite recently. Yeah. And you've seen it as well?
Great movie.
Yeah, it's a good film.
So good. So good. One of my favorite Tyrone Power performances. I know some people say it's his best, but you know me. I'm a Zorro, fanatic.
Sure. And
I always take a Zorro film with Tyrone Power in it and Basil Rathbone. But Nightmare Alley, like the original, it's a great film noir. It's one of those film noirs that's like very disarming because it's not quite like other film noirs. It's a little bit more subversive and deconstructive compared to like people watch this and they expect like, okay, where's Lauren Bacall? You know what I mean?
Sure. It's also very old Hollywood as well, and as far as its presentation, the way the performances come out. I think it's a good film. I think it holds up, but I could see from a producer standpoint why they felt like there could be a remake of this film with this story.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only remake we've gotten, I believe, and so at some point we needed to address the elephant in the circus. Okay, which one's better? And I think it'll take some parsing for us. I don't know. I have to talk about it with you.
I don't know which movie I prefer, but I think some things I really admire about the original more, and some things I really appreciate as far as what Del Toro brought to the table here.
Interesting. Okay, so then we're going to get right into it. Now, this was based on a novel by William Lindsay Gresham. A very, very sad, series of events happened to Gresham, as far as I understand. I believe he took his own life, and that novel is very, very dark, especially for the 1940s, and you can kind of tell from the movies.
Yeah, I think he actually might have taken his life where he wrote the book, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah,
I think I heard something about that. I don't remember if that's true. So yeah, I would have to double check. But I do know there was some kind of like full circle sort of thing there. And it's very sad. But of course he passed away in the 40s, I want to say, and I think it was the 40s actually. But anyway, Nightmare Alley though, this movie, it's interesting that Del Toro is kind of taking it on, I think, because what do we know about Del Toro? What do we know about like his fixations as a director? He's obviously the guy who made, creature features like Pan's Labyrinth and The Shape of Water. Both of those have like, where they're really about like the monsters are more human than the humans.
Yes.
That's kind of the, running through line for movies like that from him. But then, and also like his practical special effects have always been, kind of like one of his signature styles of like how good he is at doing that, especially, juxtaposed with horror. But he's made other stuff. I mean, Hellboy too. I forgot to mention that. But then he's made stuff like Crimson Peak, right? Which is more of like an atmosphere movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's gothic horror, but yeah, it's relying heavily on the atmosphere and the production design, as his movies usually do.
Yeah, it's more about like, okay, I don't need a monster in this. Like, I don't need like a kaiju like Pacific Rim. It's like the characters kind of do that themselves, and I guess that's kind of like what we get with Nightmare Alley, which I guess is why it's interesting that this movie, is, I guess more of a piece. It's like a cousin of Crimson Peak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are you a fan of like all of his movies, or do you have like a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen all of them. I still need to catch up on a few of the earlier ones. I think The first one I remember seeing was probably the first Hellboy movie. The first movie, though, that I really appreciated, like the auteur Guillermo del Toro, was probably Pan's Labyrinth. That came out when I was like in middle school, and I remember like that was one of those like foreign language films that I saw. It was just like, oh wow, like, you know, yeah. I mean, I was getting into film in a more like critical way, and that was one of those first films where it's like, okay, like this is like a work of art. Like it's like a very inviting film as far as like understanding, you know, like the world of cinema and all that. And it's just a really good film.
A lot of people consider it. Yeah, a lot of people consider it as magnum opus. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it touches on a lot of the themes that you expect. Someone pointed out something recently to me that I find very interesting. That is that all of his Spanish language films focus on children, and all of his English language films focus on adults, which I find kind of interesting. I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but that's something I was just thinking about now when we were discussing Pan's Labyrinth. But yeah, really good film.
Yeah, and he also did Mimic, which I mean, I don't know about you, Ashton, but Mimic is that was the first film I ever saw from him.
Okay,
that was a film that really freaked me out, like really just kind of like kicked my butt, because I remember watching that movie comes out in '97.
Okay,
and I remember my folks rented it from Blockbuster, and I caught like the movie, but like I wasn't supposed to watch it. So, you know, if they're listening, I'm sorry. I was there. I was literally hiding in the kitchen watching this movie. Wow. And I could not sleep for weeks. And I always kept it as a secret because my parents were like, why are you having all these nightmares? This is so confusing. Yeah. And it was because I watched Mimic when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
That movie's gross.
Yeah, I have not seen that one. Is that the Weinstein production?
I don't know if that's Weinstein.
I know
I'd have to look into it.
One of his earlier films was a Weinstein production, and it was just, as probably people can imagine now, it was just a very hard experience for him because it was.
Yeah, it's Miramax.
Yeah, so
yeah, there you go.
I remember that was like one of the films that it kind of like dissuaded him briefly from making movies, and then obviously, you know, he kept at it. So right. And thankfully so, I think. But yeah, that was apparently that was a tough shoot.
Now, we should say, like, obviously, like, he's directed plenty of films before that are, you know, like, he writes most of his movies, for sure. I think one of the only ones he didn't write was, like, Blade 2, maybe? I think maybe one other. Sure. But, yeah, he usually writes his own movies, even when they're, like, adapted from things. So, like, the Hellboy movies, obviously, that's adapted from the comic book. He does both of the Hellboys, but he directs and writes those. I think he's going to be directing and writing Pinocchio, right? So then with Nightmare Alley, we kind of have a similar situation here, where... You know, there's some existing source material, but he's the kind of director where he's not going to just kind of, you know, phone in a script, right?
Sure. I don't think he ever phones it in. To your earlier point, William Lindsay Gresham died in 1962, just as a correction.
Okay, it was the 1960s.
Yeah,
okay.
At least according
I think I was just thinking it was like really close to when the novel and the movie came out.
Well, so. I mean, not too far.
Apologies for the mistake.
Not too far, but I mean, yeah, not directly after.
Yeah, just half a generation away.
Sure, I guess so. But yeah. Sorry, what was the question you asked?
No, I think we got there. It was just like him not phoning in a script.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess that can lead us right into this movie.
Yeah.
Where we're not going to give all this stuff away. I know it's an old movie, but I know a lot of people have not seen the original Nightmare Alley. You know, like it's not like an unknown film. Although, you know, I don't think Nightmare Alley, like the original, was all that like well known until like people started bringing it up more in the early 2000s. Like people were kind of saying like, hey, like I think there was like a few like film historians who were like, this is a really great film. Tyrone Power tried to make this, and he put a lot of his reputation and money into it, and just didn't go anywhere. Critics kind of liked it at the time, but it was just one of those movies, you know, it was like one of those gems that the public just didn't really click with very much. And it's not like it's always been this like classic film for decades. I think the interest in it really picked up in the 2000s, and that's why, of course, I think Del Toro kind of looked at this movie and was like, hey, like I kind of want to make this. I think he started production for it like right after Shape of Water.
Yeah.
So here it is. The cast is ginormous. We already mentioned Bradley Cooper and Cate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, and I guess you kind of also mentioned Willem Dafoe is in this, Toni Collette. Huh?
I said, of course, yeah.
Yep, of course. And then, we also have Ron Perlman, you know, kind of coming in from Hellboy and all that. And then we have Richard Jenkins, who I lovely to see Richard Jenkins in anything, including Mary Steenburgen, who I know we were talking about Step Brothers, not that long ago on the show. And so I was sad that Richard Jenkins and Steenburgen didn't have a scene together, but that's fine.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was happy to see Richard Jenkins. I'm always happy to see Richard Jenkins on screen, to be clear. But, you know, he's reuniting with Guillermo del Toro after he gave, I thought, one of his best performances in Shape of Water. So I was really excited to see him in this film for sure.
I don't know if I've seen him in anything since. Maybe one or two small things, but then David Strahan, I always love seeing him. I know, like, I've been watching The Sopranos, and I didn't know he was going to be in. The Sopranos, and he pops up, and I'm like, it's always funny too, because when you're watching a show and like, you know, an actor is big now, right? Like, I guess Strahan is not that big, but he's a big TV actor. Like, people know this guy.
Well, he was in Nomadland this past year.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he was in Nomadland. So he was just in a Best Picture winner. But no, like even before that, I think like he was a big TV actor. So when I saw him in Sopranos, I was like, okay, this is not a throwaway character. They're going to do something with him. And sure enough. But anyway, that's the cast. The story follows Bradley Cooper as kind of this vagabond. You know, he's just kind of like wandering. You know, we see him like walking out of a burning house. We don't know what his past is. He wanders into a carnival, gets hired on the spot. And he starts to kind of learn the ins and outs of being a carny, a con man, and eventually a mentalist. He's mentored by David Strathairn's character, who kind of teaches him like, hey, there are ways for you to sort of like, you know, trick yourself into coming off as a mentalist, somebody who can almost appear psychic and like communing with the dead. And of course, Cooper's character, his name is Stan. He tries to see like, oh, maybe I can make a business out of this. Maybe I can go around and fool like the rich and famous, but then obviously, as he runs into a cast of characters who are a bit more than he bargained for, one of them including Cate Blanchett, who plays a psychologist for like the well-to-do, he starts to learn that, yeah, this is a very risky business indeed. Along the way, he, you know, has this sort of whirlwind romance with Rooney Mara's character, Molly, and he tries to charm her, you know, into his lifestyle, despite, you know, her sort of representing the more like the innocence and the beauty that he probably doesn't deserve. So this movie, it's a long one. It's a few hours long, and it's definitely sprawling. There was a point in the movie where, you know, I was expecting it to happen, but even I was sort of like, wow, like Del Toro really is sort of like not making a ton of changes. And I think like changes in terms of like the structure of the film, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, the beats.
And I think that's for the better. Yeah, the beats. Yeah. The beats are all there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what about for you, Will? Like, how do you think this compares? And did you enjoy this movie, Nightmare Alley?
As far as how it compares, it's definitely not as streamlined as the original. I mean, obviously the original film was, I think, like 111 minutes, or, you know, it's a little under 2 hours. This one, as you mentioned, is 2.5. And most of it is adding to the first half of the story, or at least adding to the character of Stan. And as you mentioned in the original, he's kind of more of a, you know, like on the level guy at the beginning of the film. Like he's hustling and bustling, but he seems like he's kind of more straight edge than he is in Bradley Cooper's.
Yeah, he's a straight man.
Yeah. In Bradley Cooper's version, like, as you mentioned, literally the first thing we see of him is he's dragging a body and he's going to, like, you know, light this house on fire. And it's like, you know, this guy may not be entirely straight. You know, he's...
he may not be on the up and up.
Yeah. He might have some shady stuff in his past, and I think that adds to the intrigue. I imagine that's something that's going to upset some people. I'm not quite sure how it compares to the book. I don't know if you've read the book or not, but I have not.
No, yeah. But I personally think it is a choice that, like, not that it's better than the original, but I think that it's a smart update.
Yeah, I think
it serves the purposes of this movie pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite thing I think about this version compared to the original is that it does feel a little bit more fleshed out. Obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of the characters that were, you know, fairly secondary in the original get a little bit more to do. I think certainly that's the case for Rooney Mara's character, Molly. I think she, you know, she's a little bit more well-rounded in this film. In the previous version, she's like, you know, very doe-eyed and, you know, very like kind of unassuming in a way that it feels old-fashioned in some very dated respects. But yeah, I think it's bulkier than the original film. I don't think always for the best, as you mentioned. I think the pacing of it is probably where this one suffers the most, because the first half is where we're establishing so much, and I don't know if we really need all that in the first half, but I feel like that's where Del Toro is probably the most alive and the most comfortable, as far as just exploring the carnivalesque, you know.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised that we actually did leave it, because I was like, this feels so like Del Toro is just relishing in this world. You know, you can tell that they paid so much attention to the production design of like making down to like how muddy the roads are and how dilapidated the rides are, how practical they are too. Mm-hmm. I was like, I feel like he wants to spend the whole movie here. How is he going to do that, considering what we know about the story? And no, he's not precious about it, which I got to respect him for that. I think that he does take it to new places. Mm-hmm. I mean, the kind of sad thing is that those new places aren't as, in my opinion, as fun. Yeah. But, you know, you get used to it eventually.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think it's interesting as far as exploring Del Toro's filmography, in that it's at once like one of his more indulgent movies as far as like being, you know, prolonged and, you know, doing a bunch of different things. But also like in the second half, it feels like he's really challenging himself. It's a little bit more restrained as far as like sticking to the noir elements in a way that feels very, for him, very straight laced. Like it doesn't feel like he's playing up the stylistic choices as far as like what he usually brings to the table. It feels like he's honoring the noir elements of the original film pretty faithfully in a way that I thought was pretty intriguing for Del Toro. But at the same time, as you mentioned, I think those scenes in the second half aren't quite as interesting or as quite as, or as memorable as what he does in the first half of the film.
And part of it too is that it's not that the performances like stop being good, you know, the performances are there. It's just like the location, like it really comes down to the locales just being very less interesting for a while. We're in a psychologist's office that, you know, it has a little bit of flair, but it just doesn't quite match. You know, he's like in these galas, he's in this hotel, and it's all very, I don't know, it's all very simple. You know, there's like a sort of monolithic metropolis sort of feel to it at times that is kind of interesting. Yeah. I will say though, the movie.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's a little samey, I guess, for lack of a better word. It just kind of they all like look a little.
It doesn't pop as much.
Yeah, exactly.
But I will say, like we do, like my ears perked up when we do end up in the like big mansion where we find Richard Jenkins' character. That's when I think like it kind of starts to like pick up again for me, because that location was very interesting. That location was like, oh gosh, like I'm feeling a little bit of like a threat here. I'm feeling like a bit of like doom and gloom. We have the guy from I always forget the actor's name. He was just in Wrath of Man, and he was in Mindhunter, the show that you started.
What's that guy's name? I know who you're talking about. I don't remember his name either.
I think it's Holt McElhaney. The problem is like I always think Holt McElhaney is the name of the character from Mindhunter. Sure. So sometimes I hesitate there, but like I think like that whole introduction of those characters is really, really great. Like I just think that location's good, but then it loses some of its like, I don't know, interest, because then we start just going back to it unceremoniously, and then you get used to it. Then it's just sort of like, it's old hat at this point. But yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. The reason it doesn't fall apart for me is because I think the last like 15 or 20 minutes are really outstanding. Like I think that's just Del Toro at his best right there. And those last few moments, I don't know if you'll agree. And I also just think,
I do. And
I think, and this is where we probably are going to disagree based on what you said earlier. I think Cooper's performance is what keeps the film together, for me at least. I mean, yeah,
he tries. Like I don't want to criticize the performance that much. The issue is I think he's playing a different character than what's in the script. I think that's what it comes down to for me. And I think it's not his fault. I think it's that he's totally miscast.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this was supposed to be DiCaprio. I remember hearing that he was initially.
I don't think DiCaprio. See, I don't think these guys are too old for this part.
They are kind of old for it.
Yeah, like this part should be going to like somebody like I don't want to say Timothée Chalamet or like, you know, Miles Teller or whatever, but like somebody around that age range. You know, I'd have to think about it, but like,
sure,
you know, give it to Michael B. Jordan. You know, give it to somebody who is just like at a certain age where you buy their hunger, their desire, like they feel like the world is ahead of them. But the problem is when you cast guys in their 40s, it's like that's not really the story here. Like nothing, it's not that you can't have that, but it's like you have to update it a bit. But like you even have dialogue in this movie where like people are kind of just treating the Bradley Cooper character as a guy who's like in his mid-20s and being just like, you got the whole world is your oyster, kid. They call him like young buck. I'm like, it's Bradley Cooper. What are we doing?
Prefer if it was like Zac Efron?
Zac Efron, I think, could have pulled this off quite well.
He has that boyish face and stuff too. Yeah, and
we saw him in the Ted Bundy movie. We know that he can kind of like hide a lot of, you know, darkness behind those beautiful, beautiful eyes.
Yeah, there you go.
But
he can be very charming, but now we can see he's very sinister or unpredictable in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And it even comes down to like Molly too, because I think that, you know, Rooney Mara, she's not an old actress, obviously, but she does, I don't know, she also didn't fit this part perfectly for me. Even that like doe-eyed mentality, she's in her late 30s, I want to say at this point, or maybe like mid 30s. And I think it's a part for somebody who's a bit more like in their 20s. And I don't want to be ageist, you know what I mean? Like I think that anybody can do any of these parts and it can be very successful. I just think that it distracted me a bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It didn't bother me, I guess, as much as it bothered you. I did kind of feel that more, though, with Rooney Mara as opposed to Bradley Cooper's performance, but I can see what you mean.
Now, that's not to say that any of the other performances don't work here. I mean, I think that like everybody else is like perfectly cast. Like Willem Dafoe is like the ringleader of a carny. Like, yes, please.
Yes,
like
he's
that,
great.
Genius.
Ron Perlman is very inspired as the strongman.
Yep.
I think that was, expected but great casting. For me, though, I was gonna say
Tim Blake Nelson. I got to give him a mention.
I mean, I didn't want to give that one away, but I guess that's not really a spoiler to say that he's in the film.
Yeah.
But his role in the film is a bit of a spoiler, I guess. But I mean, I think I had no, real faults with their performances. The only one that I was kind of back and forth on, and you might disagree with this, is Cate Blanchett. And I think that's because
I was saving her for last.
Okay.
I was not a huge fan of her performance in this. I think her she does a good job at it,
right.
but I just don't think it's the right register.
Right. I think it's the energy is kind of not quite right. It's like in the original
she's
film,
at 11, Cooper's at 6, I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, in the original film, her character is like a little bit more unpredictable, I guess. It's a little bit harder to read her intentions as far as like, is she actually someone that should be trusted as this like kind of like a psychiatrist type character, or is she someone that is actually looking out for Stan's best interests? And I feel like Cate Blanchett, she's doing the, femme fatale thing pretty, she's leaning into it a lot, and it's a fun performance, but it just seems like there's no like real mystery to her character. It's like, as soon as you see her in this film, it's just like, oh, she's going to be up to some sneaky stuff. And so, the ending is
what you're saying.
Yeah.
To what you're saying, that I think what she's doing here is like she's almost doing like a satirical, like over exaggerated femme fatale to that effect.
Yeah, it's
instead of
like a Roger Rabbit type
making
of
it her own,
almost like something
like what kind of performance?
like it's like something you would see in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I guess, like a parody of noir. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I just think that can work if it's part of the script, and if Bradley Cooper is kind of on that same page, if they had like a more playful chemistry, right? But they just really don't. Like it's just it's very awkward, and I just didn't really buy the sort of dynamic between them. I guess part of that is intentional because it's not supposed to be very graceful in terms of like what they see in each other and getting something out of each other. I just don't think it's like I just don't think it quite works.
I think the chemistry is fine. It's not like smoking hot, but it's fine. But I think
that's the thing. You need it to be not just fine. You need it to be great.
Sure,
because it's a pivotal relationship in the movie.
I just think her character needed to be a little bit muddier, I guess, as far as her intentions. It just seemed like they just made it too clean cut in a way that was supposed to be, especially given how long this movie is and how that's supposed to be a big reveal towards the end. I just felt like that character wasn't as unpredictable as it seems. It just kind of made me question the intelligence of Bradley Cooper's character more than anything.
If we can go back to Cooper, I will say this about his performance. I think that it does progressively get better over the course of the movie for me. I think that like my least favorite, I think, part of this movie with him, like involving his performance, is the first part. And in the middle part, it's like, I think it's slightly better. I think that there's a little bit more confidence. There's a little bit more of like that guy going off the rails. Then by the end of it, I'm just like, wow, like he's really bringing it. I think that's what it's all leading to. It's just not a very, it's very uneven in that sense. You kind of have to wait the whole movie, I think, to get the Bradley Cooper performance that has the Oscar reel, I guess. But I don't know. It sounds like you kind of disagree with that.
I think he's just pretty solid throughout. I think with Tyrone Power's performance, there is like a little bit of a theatricality to it, but it's still pretty thorny, but in like a charming sort of way. It does have that like kind of broad type of performance that I think in this movie, it seems like Bradley Cooper is he's trying a bunch of different things. He's going pretty far into like making the character seem a little bit, a little bit more overzealous, I guess, a little bit more arrogant as far as like how he's portraying the character. But I feel like it fit in line with his filmography. It didn't feel out of place for the film or what he has done in other performances. And I don't know. I feel like there is that like bravado to him, but there is that sense that like you can like get lost in his eyes and kind of feel like, oh, like I can understand why people get tricked by this version of Stan. Like it didn't feel inexplicable to me in that respect. But I agree with you. I think for me, it just the fact that he is able to kind of weather the changing tides of the film pretty evenly in a way that I think Del Toro doesn't feel quite as sure-footed is what keeps the movie pretty level. But at the same time, like I don't think it's like as good as he is in like A Star Is Born or in Silver Linings Playbook or something, but I do think it's quite a good performance all the same.
I do want to at least, round out here with the stuff that I like, because I'm probably making it sound like I'm just not into this, which is definitely not the case. I think what I like about this movie quite a bit is touching upon some of the stuff we've already mentioned, the atmosphere. I mean, the whole vibe of this movie is exactly my thing. It's this sort of like dark, imaginative. It's almost like Del Toro was kind of wanting to make like a Tim Burton movie, kind of make his version of Dumbo, but adapt something else, but using that same sort of aesthetic, at least to some degree, right?
I thought about Burton a lot, for sure.
This honestly, it had the vibe of a Tim Burton Batman movie, not Batman himself, but like a lot of these characters felt like they could exist like in the Batman universe, like very the Tim Burton Batman universe, to be clear, characters here like just like the way that they talk, like the exaggeration of them. Like I was like, my goodness, like Del Toro could make such a fascinating sort of Batman world kind of movie. I'm glad he won't, because I prefer him making movies like this, but it's just something I couldn't help but think.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more of the movies where he's actually in the carnival, like Big Fish and Dumbo, as you mentioned, but I can see what you mean, I guess, with the Batman comparison.
Yeah. I think it was just like the Rogues Gallery I was thinking of. It, like really like the Bradley Cooper character feels like a Batman villain, but like the origin to it, not like Joker obviously, but like one of the more like B-side sort of Batman villains, B-side Batman, get it? And then also, I don't think there's enough good stuff we can say about the craftsmanship in this movie. There are folks who say, like, we like practical effects. We like practical effects. Del Toro is one of the few directors who doesn't just pay lip service to that. I think that, like, in this last decade, we've had that. Like, we've had directors who come out on their big press tours and they're just like, we did these practical effects. And then you watch the movie and you're like, yeah, maybe you did like 2 or 3 scenes that had a practical effect in it, but this thing was 99% CGI. And it feels like it's usually like a gimmick at this point, but that's never the case with Del Toro. With him, it's always part of the movie. Like, you have CGI in his movies, obviously, but you have so many scenes here that are built upon like a real attention to like making movie magic, in the traditional way and not in a way that's gimmicky. So I always got to give Del Toro, hands up in the air, snaps for that. I always love to see it. It's the main reason why I watched this movie and I had a good time with it despite my problems, is because I spent a couple hours just kind of like living in one of his worlds, and it's hard to compete with that for a lot of other films.
Yeah, I get that. I guess for me, it doesn't come together, I think, as well as some of his recent and better films, I think. Like you said, Shape of Water or Pan's Labyrinth, I think, feel a little bit more wholly realized. I think this is more like I agree
with you there.
I think I appreciate the little individual moments more than how it comes together all together. But I mean, I think there's a lot to value and appreciate here. I still think it's a good film by and large. It just hasn't really stuck with me as much as I hoped. It's the type of movie where it's like I have to like kind of remind myself of it more than like, oh yeah, like thinking back on Nightmare Alley, like what a good film. It's just more like, oh yeah, that movie came up, but then when I remember, it's like, yeah, a lot of this worked, a lot of this I was with it. And like I said, I think if it wasn't for the last like 10 or so minutes, I probably wouldn't be as favorable as I am towards it. I think that really ties the two fairly uneven chapters of this film together in a really neat way. But at the same time, yeah, it's I can see, I think his ambition maybe got a little bit of the better of him here. But I think, like you said, Del Toro remains a pretty ace craftsman as far as these movies are concerned. And I really valued the craft here, especially seeing it on the big screen for sure.
Yeah. I would just say, go into this movie like with those expectations. You're going to get that. Just don't expect that it's going to sweep you up emotionally. Like maybe it will, and that's great. But yeah, if that's kind of like what you seek out first and foremost in a movie, this one, it's not that it doesn't have emotion in it. It's not that it doesn't have like a really good conflict and a really good arc for this Bradley Cooper character. I mean, it's based on an existing story that's lasted the test of time for a reason. But I do think a lot of it's pretty predictable. A lot of it's, not a formula, but it is something that is so old and he doesn't do that much with it that it's not like you're going to watch this and be like, wow, it doesn't recontextualize anything. It doesn't make you like have really conflicting emotions for a lot of these characters. Instead, you kind of walk out of it being like, well, yeah, that's happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely bleaker than the original film. I mean, I'm guessing it's not as bleak as the novel, but it does feel a little bit more brooding. It's certainly more violent than the original movie, in a way that I think, adapting it for a modern audience and with Del Toro's vision, I think that's of piece. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, it's one of those type of films where if you absolutely love the original film, I don't think this one's going to persuade you to be like, oh, this like fully warrants being remade. But I think as far as remakes are concerned, it's still a pretty darn good one all the same.
Let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. All right. 199 critics have weighed in on Nightmare Alley on Rotten Tomatoes. Well, Ashton, what is your prediction for the Rotten Tomatoes score the day we record this?
Oh, man.
And I will say, one of these reviews is from me. So you got to keep that in mind. Who knows what I said?
I'm in there too, right? This time?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because you did this for the young folks.
Yeah.
You're in there somewhere.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, great.
Two Rotten Tomato critics.
Just a couple. Yeah, that's our Veggie Tales.
Yeah, there you go. I'm gonna put on my blindfold and put my hand up and do my own prediction. My gut says 74%.
74% is your prediction. That's probably about what I would have predicted. Like, I probably would have been in that zone, maybe slightly higher, but I don't know for sure what I would have said. It's at 80% though, so you're off about by 6. It's a tough one though. It's a tough one to predict. I think. All right. Critics have been kind of all over the place with this.
But that's not like shocking or anything. That makes sense too.
Right.
I just kind of figured that because the response has been a little bit more muted, at least from where I've seen, I figured it was a little bit lower. But, that's certainly very high.
And I think it was in the 70s at one point. I think it's been going up. But what about audience score? We have 250 plus verified ratings. As we mentioned, it is in wide release through Searchlight, although you wouldn't really know it. I think like when I was looking at like Letterboxd, it's not a lot of people logged the movie too, which is, unfortunate, but that's how it goes. What do you think, Will, about the audience score? What's your prediction there?
I think they're not going to be too far from where critics are with this one. I think most people would like it, but I feel like they're not going to be in love with it in the way that they've loved previous Del Toro movies. Like, I don't think this one will warrant the same enthusiasm that some folks have for Pacific Rim, for instance. So I'm going to say... pretty similar to my previous prediction. I'm going to say probably like 76%.
Wrong.
What is it?
62%.
Oh, wow. That's pretty low. I mean, it's still,
I know.
Still fresh, but not just barely fresh. Yeah.
I think that's maybe that'll help you, though, predict the cinema score, because we have that, too. The folks in Vegas were like, hey, we know something about gambling at all.
Yeah.
What do you think the cinema score for this movie is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling a little off with this one today. Unfortunately, I've been better elsewhere. So I guess my career in Vegas as a what do you call it? What is technically
prognosticator?
Yeah, but I thought there's like a word begins with I that like not like an illusionist, but like what's the maybe it is illusionist. I don't know what word exactly I'm looking for, but nevertheless, my career in Vegas isn't going anywhere. But I imagine they're going to be a B on this film.
A B?
Yes.
That's spot on. You got it there.
Oh, boy. Okay.
You got it in the end, just like the movie itself.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe there's hope for me as a magician. Yeah.
Were you trying to think of Mentalist?
Mentalist, yes. I don't know why I was thinking it was. I was thinking Mentalist, yes.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, illusionist? Like, what is this, Christopher Nolan movie?
No, that's The Prestige. The other one.
Oh, yeah. Who did The Illusionist then? I'm trying to remember.
I forget the director. That was with Edward Norton and Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. I don't remember. But okay, that is Nightmare Alley. And oh my gosh, literally the score just changed because a couple more reviews got added.
Okay.
So we already dated ourselves.
Wow.
Nightmare Alley is now at 81%.
Wow.
So you were off by even more. But I'm just kidding.
That was The Illusionist was Neil Berger, the director of
that's right.
Limitless, which starred Bradley Cooper.
Is that the one where he's limitless?
You better believe it. But that, ties it back around. We're talking about Bradley Cooper. There you go.
There you go. Yeah, it always comes back around there. Thank you so much for listening to our show. Be sure to subscribe to Cinemaholics on your favorite podcast app of choice or find us on YouTube. See you all next time.